We would like to call to order our curriculum committee meeting for today. It looks like everybody is in attendance that's a part of our committee. And we will need a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we have a motion to approve the agenda. And it doesn't look like we have any public comments. I don't think we got any over email either. And so we'll move forward to agenda on item number 5. We have a new course proposal for Mandarin Chinese 5.
Thank you, Katie. So what this is just progressing our Mandarin Chinese sequence to have a level 5 capstone course. And just in terms of the timeline for publishing board book, the version you have of the approval form is when it came out of the system-wide committee. It's since been reviewed at the central office level with affirmative support. But I think the key thing to understand is we anticipate this being a staffing neutral and relatively low-cost addition. Our numbers are still relatively low in Chinese, and we look at market supply of educators. This is one of those very low supply areas. You're just not in a position as a district to go out and hire a 25% position. So what we would need to do would be to work this within the current staffing allocation. We might potentially have to, depending on numbers, combo a section and then differentiate within the section. I just kind of wanted to paint that as a backdrop, but we do believe, we do have enough interest that it is time to add the level 5. We're going to pursue the feasibility of this being offered as a dual credit with UW Oshkosh, like our other level 5 classes are, but that's still a to be determined thing.
And it's not proposed to be an online class.
No, this would be taught by
So like a
us in our
split
school.
4 or 5 kids in one classroom being taught. 2 levels.
Potentially. It's going to depend, where the numbers are at when we go through course registrations.
Right.
So I read the support from Mr. Borowski. You indicated we don't know for sure how many students. Currently, how many sections of Chinese does our Mandarin teacher teach?
So I'd have to go back and look at the middle school. She teaches at all of our Chinese
So I
at
assume
both
they're
the middle
full-
school and high school. She's got a full load.
Yeah,
This would really mean adding this as an option for students to register for. It would be adding it as something a student could get a transcriptive grade for. In reality, it's likely we might have to offer a combined 4 or 5 section, and then Rosie would have to differentiate within the section.
so how fair is that to the teacher and the students that are split
So
versus just providing the opportunity to go to the capstone off campus to METC or someplace?
So I think it provides, so there's no question it adds to the planning load for the teacher. In an appropriately sized class, you can probably, at the student end, differentiate appropriately within there. It's not a lot different in some respects than if we had an independent study student embedded within a upper level section, which we do in other content areas. Now, in terms of not going here and making it, I mean, obviously it's always available for students to offer open and through early college credit. That would reduce the planning demand on our teacher. And that's certainly, we're asking you to teach multiple levels of Chinese right now. On the other hand, In terms of student access, they would have better student access if we offered it on campus and it fit neatly within their master schedule versus having to go off campus for a large segment of the day and having to make more challenging courses. That would really be the trade-off, Mark.
Was this a teacher generated
Yes, this is a
versus?
teacher generated request.
I think if you can handle it, schedule, administration, teacher wise. But I think Mark brings a good point that we don't want to set a precedent of making so many more preps for one person without compensation.
And when we say appropriate number of students or whatever, what does that mean?
So we have a class size policy.
Right.
And so, we would, and I'm not worried about this happening, but, we would not, if we're in a situation where offering a combo, and this is, I mean, the conversation in front of us today is this specific course. This would be true for other content areas. If offering a combo section of differentiation took us over our maximum class sizes, we wouldn't do that. We would seek to split it.
Okay.
Now, if we ever did need to begin to expand our sections for this, we would then need to make a big choice because I don't think you can do, so for example, in some content areas, and it's becoming increasingly challenging as the landscape for teacher staffing has become tighter and tighter. I can think of examples where we've offered 40% contracts, 50% contracts, 60% contracts, factional and say English or social studies or another area to kind of make our sections work. For an area like Chinese, just like tech ed, ag, some of the others that are in extremely short supply, you're either at 1 FTE or you're at 2 FTE. And right now we don't feel we're in a situation where 2 FTE makes sense. So we need to optimize what we can do with 1 FTE administratively.
Obviously, I'm not an expert, but would it make more sense if we're going to combine classes? To combine the middle school and segregate the high school classes? Or is that a
Yeah.
numbers issue?
So, I mean, that's something we can take back. I mean, I think why you're seeing this, and there's some, I think I'm working from a strong basis, but there's some assumption here, Mark, is by the time you get to 4 and 5, you have students with demonstrated interest and a background in the language. And again, when you're differentiating, you are going to need students to operate a little more independently. So that would argue in favor of the older student. The other thing is that at the middle school level, if we did a combo piece, then that brings in cross teaming, cross grading, and another area where we cross grade and cross team, which makes the middle school schedule more complicated. And again, they're younger students with a little less ability to operate independently.
Sure.
So that's why we would probably do it here instead of at the middle school.
Okay.
And this might be a little bit off topic, but I think this is an area where we've talked about having a 3-year budget where we can plan for these curriculum areas that are evolving and growing and changing. We might need it in we've talked about robotics, we've talked a little bit about leadership course, whatever, where we can plan accordingly. We can kind of estimate what we need for budget purposes if we need to add another FTE down the road. So that's just a little plug in there for that 3-year budget, because I think that will help us when we're making these decisions for planning purposes and stuff.
Yeah, are we able to project budgets like that and needs 3 years?
So I think projecting revenue, the state operates on a 2-year budget. That's the biggest single determinant of our.
I'm not thinking of budget. I'm thinking of, can we project our need for 3 years? Oh,
So at the high school level, we have a very student choice oriented model. And so when we talk about, typically when we think about high school staffing, we think about an allocation in general, and we assume we can adjust within that allocation as students make their preferences known through the scheduling process. Now, the stickier points are in certain content areas, again, your ability to kind of have a more fractional approach to staffing if the numbers merit that just isn't there for certain content areas. And so it's difficult, to say today in 3 years, how many students at the beginning of the Chinese sequence will select Chinese at the middle school. I mean, we know it's a critical language. We know it's the only critical language designated by the federal government that we offer at the high school. So it's a good thing both for future opportunities for students and kind of in response to what are identified as national needs to offer it. But so when we talk about 3-year budgets and things like robotics, it's also not just a student demand, it's also kind of from a strategic planning framework. Where do we want to see our program be in the future? I think
Yeah, that's what I,
what would be
that's
possible.
what I was kind of.
And I would argue the same point. At elementary level, we've got our enrollment projections that help dictate that. I would say 7-12, some of the expansion in curriculum, probably the greater majority of it would be department generated. So if there is a plan to expand, a desire for, like this year, we've got the multicultural living class going in. To me, I don't see why that couldn't be a 3-year budget planning process. That the department, if you're looking to expand, we need to get on this cycle, and it's not a certainty that once you're on the cycle, it's going to go through, but at least we can start planning
Yes.
from a curricular and a budgeting perspective, and I don't see any hurdles to doing that.
It's just a matter of being
Any
proactive,
more than
which we
building
already are
resources.
being proactive. It's just putting.
Right,
it-
You know, sort of a
resources.
wish list.
And to a little degree, sometimes space. So I mean, this has nothing directly to do with the Chinese proposal. But if you were to look at our English 9 and English 10 average class sizes compared to a decade ago, they have come up. And so long run, would like to get those back to where they were a decade ago. That not only means adding staffing, it also means, how are you situated space-wise?
Mhm.
And we are starting to become more and more congested at the middle school and high school. And even if we have new facilities come online in a few years, that's still a few years and not next year. So there's a few different.
So I know I kind of digressed a little bit.
I
with
move
that.
we support the proposal.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
So we will be moving this to the.
Full board for the
on Monday.
14th.
Okay,
Thank you.
so the next item on the agenda is the DEI audit recommendations. And we have, the last couple meetings, we went through all of the recommendations that came from the DEI ad hoc committee, just to kind of explain them, and we had some discussion around them. And then we have a new document that kind of shows where that shows where our discussion took us in terms of action items. So I don't know if we want to go through each item or if we want to go through the areas where we think we need to continue to follow up.
Would you like us maybe to
Yeah.
give a very high level
No.
explanation? Okay, moving on.
No, I mean, seriously, unless we didn't have, some of us have a chance to prepare, I see no real reason unless just for a quick summary to go over the purple. So it was very clear. I thought they were to the point,
I agree.
and but if there's any specific one you might want to highlight, I'm sure, didn't mean to be rude, just.
No,
But just efficient.
You're right.
Yeah, we just wanted to
No, I
make sure
agree.
everybody kind of understood where the document came from, and these are suggestions only, but yeah, we would agree, I think, Amy, that the purple ones don't necessarily need a lot of
And the only purple one that I would make a suggestion to is, I know we briefly talked about this, Mark and I talked about this too, on the one where it says improve communication practices to remove barriers to information access. This may include communicating with families who move into the school district in the middle of the school year and providing interpretation and translation services. So one of the things that we had talked about that may fall into this category was assigning like a partner family or a partner student,
Mhm.
like what, a student ambassador or whatever, to those new kids that come into the district. Like a buddy system kind of thing, whether it be through PTO or whether it be through, you know, like the student leadership team or whatever. I think that would be a nice program to have for everyone involved.
So is that something that you would want to come back here? Like the purples don't mean like done.
No, right.
Like, we
Sure.
would be working with the counselors and we would be,
Yes.
you know, continuing to
Okay.
expand support for those. But if you want that to come back here, that's what. we
Okay,
put
I see.
as yellow,
Thank you.
which we are happy to come back with an update. If that's something.
I don't necessarily think it needs to come back here. I just thought that maybe that could be something that could be added to the notes, but
Sure.
the outcome.
If we could have, through our building PTOs, volunteer families willing to participate,
Yes,
and then offer the option to new families when they come.
right.
Don't have to
It
accept
have
it,
to,
but
right.
yeah, at least that there's something there for the families and then something there for the student themselves.
And, you know, a buddy system within
Yeah,
this.
right.
And I think we do that to a certain extent, but I don't know if it's standardized across the board.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, that would be the only thing I would add to the proposal.
Number 13, which is towards the end. This continued tracking system that may exist based on perceived student abilities. There. it's in
Oh, the blue?
Yeah. it's blue.
Yes, it's one of our few, maybe our only,
Yeah, that's the only one. we
only
have.
blue
Where are
item. Yes.
The blue one at the end.
Yeah,
That's the one that would, the only one looks like it would need further exploration by our committee.
Because we were talking about how you have, how you set up prerequisites and access, and it seemed like there wasn't an established necessarily way of doing it. Sometimes it's departmental or teacher wise, and it seems like there should be some overview of that.
Right, so
agree.
some of these are a little related. And so above the blue item there is one where we're looking at accessibility for the AP classes, and we mention prerequisites, and that we have as an update item. So what we're thinking is we can bring in an update to the committee second half of the year on where we are today with prerequisites at the high school. So our prerequisites at the high school today are fewer than they were when the ad hoc committee was doing their work. And I know the high school team has done some review of practices in other local area high schools and going back to teachers and saying, asking us to take another look at the prerequisites. So I do think the landscape today is different than it was, and it may be a little different next year. So the actual matter of prerequisites, bring that in as an update. It's a very specific item. I think the reason why we were thinking, and Amy can build on this for the blue, and this is not only a potentially a high school thing, but it shows up most of the high school, is, and you'll see a little bit of this at our next meeting when we look at the state report cards, because there's a section on the state report cards that, not for scoring, but for information, breaks out student participation in the arts and other advanced, and also advanced coursework demographically. And it's a mixed picture. And so it might not only be prerequisites, it might get into how our course is presented. Are there kind of informal barriers? You know, is there a vision of what the committee would like to see? So we feel kind of what's in the blue is a bigger topic than only prerequisites. So we say prerequisites, we can bring that in, we think is a, I mean, you'll be the ultimate judge of that, but we think we can bring in an update on prerequisites as a pretty self-contained item later this year. But the conversation about access to advanced coursework, that is probably more multifaceted and might take more of your time. And so that's why we coded it blue. I don't know.
It would seem to me that boards responsible for whatever curriculum we teach. We don't generate it, we approve it. Is it unnecessary micromanaging to expect that any prerequisites to a course be district approved? You create it, we approve it, similarly to the curriculum. That would at least give us a window as to access and not seeking to lessen the rigor of the courses, but to provide opportunities and recognize that not everyone who embraces the opportunity is going to succeed phenomenally, but that the course can maintain its rigor and yet maybe the prerequisite is unreasonable in terms of having access.
So, I mean, I think that's ultimately a decision that only the board can make, is do you want that to be a board level piece? I can give you my opinion on that and then you can decide. So I think if you felt like you were, when you get the update, if you're concerned about what you're hearing and you feel we're more likely to get where you want. If you're concerned by what you're hearing and you want us to be in a different place and you feel we can get there faster if you approve it, then you might want to take a role. Practically speaking, if we're close to where you want to be, if it becomes something that you approve, that's something we would have to work into the development process of the course selection guide for the high school. Now, you know, the reason why you're seeing, why you saw the Mandarin Chinese proposal now is we try to bring our new course proposals through the board no later than November, so the counseling office can have the course selection guide ready by the time we go on winter break. So an option could be we bring all the prerequisites to you at a similar time frame and you'd sign off on it, but it'd be one more thing for the counseling office to manage. So I think the question I would ask you to consider is how great is the need for that additional level of board involvement? And I would argue you would, my suggestion would be you'd have to be concerned about where we were to justify a greater level of hands-on decision-making. And if we're close to where you'd like us to be, then I just don't think we need to go there. And I think until you see the update,
Right.
it's going to be hard for you to evaluate that.
Yep.
You know.
But I just think that the prerequisites or staging of courses, the difficulty should be left with the curriculum. But I just don't want it to be a teacher's decision how it happens. There should be a process that says, this is what we need to emphasize for you to be successful in this class. You need to be able to do this, you can't do it unless you do this, but keep the kids informed, but make it more of a district-wide acknowledgement from the professionals that this is course content and what you need to be able to do it.
Mhm.
So,
So how should we proceed? So with the yellows, the outcome is various dates or timeframes for reporting back to our committee. And then the blue, the tracking system will correlate with the yellow, with the prerequisite above it. So how do you think we should proceed?
I think we should proceed just by the color coding.
Okay.
Accept what's there, with the understanding that we'll look at some of these again. But
Okay.
I don't think I need to sign off on everything, for
No.
sure.
Okay,
The second item,
Mhm.
extending learning opportunities. I guess the question I have, it just seems like unfinished business. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, it's inconsistent, district-wide, not necessarily so. And we'll update the committee in 23, 24.
Mhm.
On what? You know, it just seems like a blank slate to me, and it's, should there be something more, what are we gonna be updated on? New initiatives? We'll be planning more for the 23, 24 school years and beyond. It doesn't say we're doing anything, and then we're gonna get an update.
So I think, when Amy and I looked at this, the ones you see with updates coming in 23, 24, a lot of the action steps would be in the professional development area. And the reality is, certainly all of our required professional development time for this year is in pen or in very dark pencil.
Right.
And so realistically, we didn't feel there was going to be any new news we could bring in before sometime next year, because we haven't developed our professional development plan for next year. And we would see that being one of the big,
Is this an area where you're looking at a 3-year out? You have a yearly developmental plan. Do you ever plan, yeah, this is what we're doing this year, and we think this is what we're doing the second year, and hopefully we'll cover this in the third year, so that it doesn't get lost. But that's just a way of planning. I don't know.
That's a very faint pencil.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we do obviously need to be responsive to,
Current
for
issue.
timely things. Right? We certainly have threads.
Well, I think this is one of the button points on both sides, culturally and implicit bias, that people are, it's in their face, and they're either for it or against it, whatever. And I think the ability to say, this is what we're going to do, like you say, maybe in the next year, we're going to consider this heavily. I don't know that we have to have a commitment, but I think we need to have something in there that we're either going to do something.
Do we still provide a buffet of choices other than the opening staff development workshop we have at the start of the school year? We used to have, for the professional days, you could pick X, Y, or Z, and then A you had to go to or something. So I don't know how the format's been done.
Sometimes we do that. We don't have that this year because we've been focusing on professional learning communities and giving
Right,
quite a bit of our
right.
time to our sites.
Yep.
But to always call those cafeteria days, so we can choose what's on the menu. We do traditionally have one of those a year, but this year we don't because
Sure.
we're giving that day.
And I don't mean to say that we have to respond to hot button topics. I think that having a purpose, an educational purpose for what our in-services are, is important. And it's not driven by a hot button. So I don't know exactly what I'm saying there, is that we're aware of it, but I really like, we're planning to do this because of this and this reason. So,
I know we had Percy Brown came in, and that was really kind of his focus, but I don't know if that was a one and done, and that was pre-pandemic. So that's at least 2 years ago. And I guess I agree with Judy that this is something that should be a reappearing thing periodically, so there's review, there's, refocusing on it, new teachers. And I guess I would like to recommend that we find at least an initial spot in the 23-24 school year for that kind of development as possible.
Is that our job to direct in services?
Make a recommendation. And we could direct if we really felt strong enough about it, but
I know we could, but I'm
I'd
not,
like to make it more of a recommendation than a requirement.
how do you as a district decide what the emphasis is going to be? in service?
We, kind of look at the district goals. Obviously that informs us significantly. A lot of that is generated from our leadership groups. So the principals of the cabinet, of course, and then also our system-wide, the department chairs.
Well, obviously you have to balance between instructional changes, programming, and then the more larger picture of just teaching in general.
Right.
Right.
Right. There's always more topics than time, certainly. So.
And where does the recommendation focus to say this is what we're going to do? Is there a top level cadre that says this is what we're going to do?
I guess we would do ultimately.
So Mark has made a
Mhm.
recommendation that we come back to the committee with a plan
With a plan when and where we can implement.
where we're
this.
gonna implement learning opportunities for regarding culture and implicit bias for the 2023-24 school year, or the beginning of the 2023 school year. And
I would like to, I don't know, modify that to say, without putting in the 2023-24 school year, I would like to just say, where do you think this might come? Ask the administrative team to be more, what's your vision for implementing that? As opposed to be directive and say next year. It could be next year.
what I'm hearing is, and I could be wrong, but it would be good to see kind of a very faint pencil kind of outline of what our vision is overall in terms of in-service days for maybe this year and next year. Not that we're going
And
to
the
direct it,
priorities.
but that would help us, so if we could, and I'm not sure if that's something that you do, but it sounds like pen, dark pencil, really faint pencil, it would probably be good to see a vision for what that's gonna look like for the next couple of
Well,
years.
and clearly with the PLC. That's a mammoth undertaking because it's all our staff, all of our administrators. And it's also something we've put hundreds of thousands of dollars in, maybe more than that, into training, and with the hope it's really having an effect. So, and that's a gargantuan chunk this year. I don't know that we always have that gargantuan of a chunk, but I do know we're not privy right now to any changes in instructional programming at whatever level that would require intensive amounts of time as well. But unless we're getting kind of a priority, this is the kind of thing, or some other that, yeah, we want to do it, but we never get to it because it's not prioritized. And I'd just like to see some prioritized put on it so that we can be assured it's going to get in the next 2 school years. Something to that effect.
Do we want to see the administrator's priority for that? Is that what you're asking for?
But I think it's probably as important to the whole staff as any other, concept we can come up with. That I think it needs to be on within the next 2 years, if not next year, then the year after.
And you're looking at within the next 2 years, and then you're also looking at, is it a required in-service or is it an opportunity for everyone? I mean, that's a different way of looking at it, and I don't know if the in-services are, I'm not sure if they're required, or you mentioned smorgasbord, but how many things are unique to elementary or grade or total district? So there's that level too. I think it could be a recommendation that opportunities regarding cultural and implicit bias be one of the priorities of the district within the next 2 years.
Perfect.
And let's see where that goes.
Sounds good to me.
Motion?
I don't know if we're looking at motions yet, or we're just we're,
Well, do you want to make that a motion?
I don't know where we are in the world with this right now.
Why
So
don't we just put that right down? I mean, I
in the
don't-
outcome section,
yeah, in the outcome section.
under, which one was it,
Number
Mark?
two.
Number 2.
Number 2.
Yeah, I think that could be an outcome that we request that the district makes this a priority in the next years.
I mean, you could update the outcome to make that the ask, and then we bring you an update next year on our progress.
Yeah.
That
towards
makes more sense.
I like that, yeah.
Is there any other discussion around that particular recommendation, or do we have any questions about any of the other recommendations within this document?
Covered the ones I had issues with.
Number 4.
Mhm.
Just to make sure I understand what it's getting at is that we would be looking at our RTI framework and analyzing its effectiveness with the groups they're working with. Is that pretty much what that's saying?
Right, so in the context of these recommendations, our thinking is because what our support models look like vary across levels, we would do this over 2 meetings. And
Right.
part of it would be because it's been a few years to revisit what our support models look like, and then bring in information about who's being served based on our different populations. And to the extent we have useful data, what do we see as the rates of progress across different groups? Now, it's very much, what we have here is very much in this context. If after hearing that, there are other things you want us to bring in at subsequent meetings, we obviously can do that. But this is, revisit what our support models look like, who's being served, what are we seeing for rates of progress across different groups.
Can you
So
tell me what
what
RTI or RTL means?
So RTI is, it's almost become an acronym with its own meaning, because when it first came in, it was response to intervention. And now it's intended to represent response to instruction, with the idea of some of the support students receive occur in the classroom and not always with a designated interventionist. Another related concept, and it's really the same concept, but another term you will hear will be the multi-tier system of support, or MTSS. And there are some changes in identification criteria for some primary disabilities. And so Tiffany is leading some work more on the behavioral side with the systems of support there as well. But basically, if you wanted to kind of connect it back to the professional learning communities model, the third question of, so the first question is, what do we want students to know and do? How do we know, or how do we assess how they are progressing? The third question is, what do we do when they haven't reached proficiency? So RTI would be the way we tackle the third question of professional learning communities. But even if we weren't a professional learning community model school district, RTI or MTSS is something you'd see in any school in Wisconsin.
So I don't even like opening my mouth, because it feels like I'm just throwing more work at you guys. So, but seriously, if we're going to look at that, is it any more cumbersome to include all those students below proficiency in that study, and then do your aggregated comparisons by whatever, class areas you wish to, low income, that sort of thing. Because if we're going to do it, the data, I think you're going to have to take it from the same data source, and it's just a matter of looking at all our below proficiency, not just segregated groupings.
So the timeline for something like that would probably best be summer or fall, so that we could have like this year's worth of data. So second semester, unless it's like second semester, might be better timing for that sort of data.
I'm wondering if it isn't, if we're looking at it from high up above as opposed to hands on the ground, how are our kids doing? And if you're looking at the small learning communities, they must look at this and they see the kids and they know the different variety of types of kids we're having. And you're just, what's the risk? How's our instruction going over for everybody? And don't they do that at a lower level? I know data is important, but sometimes it's like, this is where you need to put your efforts. Sitting around in a small learning committee meetings, or how are we doing?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a huge part of our model.
Yeah,
And that's something that the teams
do all the time.
My concern is what I brought up at our last meeting, and how do we know what improvements we're making with our sub-proficient groups of students? I don't care what their characteristics are. I think it's important to know with the marginalized students specifically, but it's equally important for any student under proficient, which right now in our district is over 50%. What success are we having doing what we're doing? Where are we seeing growth? And to me, this is a subset of that. Important, very, but no less important than a large group as a whole. And
I think that's a huge focus, as I was just saying, of the PLC level work and also the school level work. If you look at any team's SLO or any principal's SLO, I mean, that is the data that we are looking at. Those are the sorts of goals that we have written. If they're basic on the front, we
Okay.
want them to be proficient on the.
But how are they doing? We're looking at them. How, is it working? Is what we're doing working is my concern, both as a parent and as a board member. If my kid's ranked 25th percentile in her class in reading, where can I expect her to get to with the help she's getting? And if she isn't moving above 25%, what should we be doing differently? That's the thing I'm interested in. And I think that ties exactly with this stuff. That's what we want to know about our marginalized groups, but heck, we've got tons of kids that I'm afraid are treading water. And by the time they get out of high school, their opportunities are diminished by 50% compared to someone who's already at proficiency in the 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. And so, well, we taught them, they just didn't get it.
So if I could make a suggestion at your next meeting, as kind of a down payment, we'll be looking at our state report cards.
Yep.
And on the state report cards, there are, and again, we have a lot of descriptive, kind of what I'll call Polaroids of kind of where kids are at based on different things. But on the school report card, there will be 2 pieces, and again, Mark, these are only off state assessments, that will give us information about how our lower achieving students are progressing. So when we look at the growth section of the report cards, one of the breakout categories, growth rate for non-proficient students on the value added compared to other populations. That's one piece of information. There's also a piece on the report cards that relates to what the state calls a target group. So they will look at your lowest 25% of students from the prior year's state testing. How did they move? Now, because of the size of our classes, the size of our schools, because it's only a spring 3rd grade number, and we didn't have, again, this will be different next year, but in the spring of 2021, we didn't get, for any of our 3 elementary schools, the minimum cell size to report out the target on the state report card. However, we know how they calculate it. We have redacted information. We could actually pull together, without a lot of work, a 3-school, it wouldn't be on the report card, but when we bring the
Sure.
report cards in, we could say, we can tell you what this looks like for the 3 schools combined. We can't tell you what this looks like for Arboretum, Heritage,
Right.
Prairie. I think your question, though, is not only the state assessments, what do we see on things like our local assessments? What do we see on course-based assessments, reading levels, things like that? And I think to Amy's question, some of that information in their course teams, I think our teachers have good handles on, but in terms of good data that we could bring here for a high quality discussion, that would probably take us some work to pull together. So we can bring some information in as soon as your next meeting. Others, it would take us more time to pull together in a format suitable for you all.
And that'd be awesome. And if it's 3 months to get it, 4 months, I understand that, but it's something we can't keep ticking down the road. And we look at the numbers, and, yeah, pretty good. Yeah.
And I think that goes along with our priorities. We're talking about our priorities, and one of the top priority is excellence and outcome. And, so I think we've made an investment in interventionists and, over the last couple of years. And like you said, how is it going? Is it working? And I think it's good to be able to assess that and make certain that the action steps that we're taking as a district to move kids along are effective. So.
Completely agree.
So within the next few months or something,
Yep.
that would be something that we,
Perfect.
okay, awesome.
Page 2, the yellow. I thought that
What is this? How does it start?
provide professional learning opportunity, coaching to all
Okay.
staff members in the area of family, community, including communication, relationship building, etc. I like the thing with the trauma sensitive schools. Tim, I did have a question because you're the one that enlightened me with it. Did we do culturally responsive teaching as a book study, or was that also a in-service professional development opportunity?
So I think there've been a few different pieces. I mean, I think the thing we've done the most work with is, I think I shared it with the committee last year, and Katie, I don't know if I shared a copy with you. There's a book by an author named Zaretta Hammond, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. We've done some book studies internally. Middle school is currently engaged in a whole school book study on it. High school has a voluntary book study for points on it. And we've offered kind of high-level summaries of Hammond's work
Sure.
at professional development workshops over the years. And again, I can't do justice, for all of Hammond's concepts. So basically, she tries to outline what educators need to consider to create the conditions in their classroom where they can push all kids to high levels of rigor. So we've done that in a variety of ways. This particular recommendation from the ad hoc was getting around the area of communication and relationship building. And, we've offered the trauma sensitive schools training. That was actually part of the state school safety grants, but it's really important. We're required to do it as a condition of accepting the school safety grant pre-pandemic. It's really valuable learning, I think, for everybody. And so I think a question is for people we've hired since we had the mandated training, how do we make sure they receive it? And that's one of the many things, and Amy's had to step out for a moment. It's one of many things that Amy's had to, balance in terms of the professional development plan. But I think the other thing is, if you're a teacher, we have mentoring, so, when communication is an all-year activity, but, kind of one of our more higher profile communication events with families, of course, parent-teacher conferences. So if you're a new teacher to the district, if you're brand new to the profession, it might be something your mentor coaches you through in early October. And if you're new to the district, well, parent-teacher conferences look a little different no matter where you go. And so that's something where the new teacher advisor, even if you're a veteran staff member new to the district, might have a conversation with our new hires, what to expect for your fall parent-teacher conferences. But I do think but that's really communication broadly construed. I think where the ad hoc recommendation was here is how do we make sure we provide not only a high quality of communication in general, but a high quality of engagement and communication to our families regardless of backgrounds. So for example, family that may not share some of the same experiences I have, how can I be sure that I'm well engaged with them as I probably am with someone with whom I share a lot in common? Because as educators, we have a professional obligation to do that well for everybody. And so what kind of professional learning have we provided for everybody? And I think outside of some voluntary workshops, I don't think we could really say we've done anything across the board for everybody. And so I think that's something that the ad hoc committee wanted to say, we should look at that. Similarly
Right.
to the second item that we spent some time discussing earlier. And so Amy's thinking in mind was professional learning topic. It's important, but we really won't have a chance, again, applicable to our conversations around what next year's
Right.
professional development plan is. We won't have a chance to come back to it with real information till sometime next year. So.
Okay.
Did you have another question about that?
No, I guess it really is comparable to number two,
Right.
is that to your point, where Judy's point, I guess, if we had a kind of a master flow chart that had hugely important, would like to do kind of thing, and then kind of on a 3-year calendar. And to your point, we're like, with the new teachers, how do we give them what we gave the old teachers? And how many of the old teachers need renewal? If we could have this sort of evolving calendar, and in certain years, district goals are this takes up the whole darn thing.
Yeah.
But it's, I know it's struggling balls and what have you, but I think this probably should fit similarly to
Falls
number
into
2.
that. Okay.
Okay.
So does that wrap up our discussion with with these recommendations?
Judy, you have anything else?
No, I think we've covered the
Okay,
ones.
I'm sorry, I do.
That's fine. You don't have to apologize. It's good.
Last page. Include BIPOC authors, stories, books, fiction, nonfiction. A concern I think I've heard from a handful of parents, but in reflection as a former teacher at the ELA, I'll say English. The reading list thing to me is important for a lot of different reasons. We need to be emphatic of multicultural experiences, realities. But a concern I have is that in our urgency to be doing the socially correct thing, or the morally correct thing, that our lists are becoming an avalanche of strictly multicultural selections and replacing some of the traditional literature, fiction, nonfiction that are also coming of age stories, life crisis stories that have a great deal of validity and literary value. And so I don't know how we assure that we just don't, that in trying to do the right thing, we have an extremely limited focus on our literary selections. I think the community looks at ELA, at least in the middle school, as advanced reading development. Certainly in our curriculum, we look at it as much more enriched and involved than that. It's critical reading, analytical reading, comparative reading, on varied topics, to open the mind. But my fear is that if I come into you pick the grade, it doesn't matter, as long as it's a general course versus specific, like women literature or multicultural literature, whatever. Those are very specific focus. I go into an American Lit class or just your broadband classes. as a teacher, I want a rich representation of, from across spectrums, not overemphasize on one, underemphasize on the other. And I don't know how we get to that point. I did see a reading list from a class at the middle school that concerned me because there were 20 pieces that were entirely, I'll just call them multicultural topics, and there wasn't any of the traditional readings there. And I think that's the thing that concerns some in our community. For me, I'm concerned because I want to balance. I want, and so how do we get to that point?
So you will have a meeting coming up later this academic year, where you're going to have an update from the 712 ELA department. And I think one of the things that would help facilitate this conversation would be to ask the department, as part of that, to have all of their text lists for the courses. So you can kind of see the entirety instead of, you know, here's one unit. And I think there's two things going on. So first of all, like you noted, Mark, there's what are the texts and the courses that all kids take? So elementary, intermediate, and then grades 7 through 10. Then in the 11th and 12th grade year, it's very elective based. So that's one piece. Then within those required courses, say in an English 9 or an English 8, what are the whole class reads that all kids participate in? And also as a teacher, you know that you have a standard text that you can anchor other teaching points into because you know all kids are seeing the same text. You can bring in other learning targets. What I will say that kind of a trend in ELA is to provide students with more small group book circles and more student choice. So then you've got the whole class reads, and then you have the menu of texts for a more thematic small group. And so I do think kind of the list you saw was probably a thematic choice unit where the intention was for it to be multicultural, which probably influenced the composition. And I really think it will be, you know, when you have the opportunity to kind of look at the reading list in their entirety, then you can kind of begin to assess, seeing the whole landscape, you know, what your questions might be. And I think that's coming up, I want to say January, but
Yeah,
I think that's when's our second,
January.
late January, I
Yeah,
think.
late January.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, Mark, because I had the same concern. I've received same feedback. Tim and I have kind of talked about that before. So it'll be good to have that discussion in January. And, you know, I think it's important to have a really strong balance for the kids.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, so the next item on the agenda is items for future meetings, which we talked about. We're gonna be, the next meeting will be our accountability report cards. And test participation at that time will be discussed, how we were gonna address that. Is there anything else we would want to add to the future meetings?
For your next meeting, we are going to bring in an information item for you because we felt you were the best committee for it. Your goal on SEL and how we're measuring it. We're going to provide you with an update on how we're approaching the measurement of that.
Great.
So Lisa will certainly prepare the materials. There's a good chance Lisa will be here to present that herself, but if Lisa's unable to schedule it in, then Amy and I will share that with you.
And we don't have it scheduled yet.
No, but we could do that now.
Okay. We want to schedule something in November.
So, I mean,
November is
the
December.
money question is, you have a board meeting on the 14th. The state report cards are released on the 15th.
Okay,
So if you want the report cards in board book, the earliest we can put them in board book is November the 15th. And so then it comes down to a question of, do we want to meet before or after the Thanksgiving break, and kind of what your schedules look like as a committee.
And don't forget that you have your curriculum presentation scheduled on the 28th.
Yeah.
We're still soft on that, on some of the logistics of that, but we're firming up.
On the 20th of what?
28th of November.
We're going back to our curriculum like we used to do.
Right. Well, I thought
That's a
where-
whole board meeting, not a curriculum committee meeting.
Right.
So I mean, I think, one option would be,
And what
we-
curriculum is being presented?
Yeah.
That's the
Oh,
question.
what curriculum? I don't know.
yes, I
Yeah, I see it.
I can look that up. Here,
I was confused because we were talking about January.
Yeah.
so- But we have 3, don't we?
We have two,
2,
one in November and one in January.
okay,
And there's 4 groups that you choose.
got it.
yeah, and I know what groups are presenting this year. I'm just checking, pulling up what are who's when. And so it looks to me like we have
I want to say agriculture.
it's going to be, yeah. So it's going to be ag, mathematics, computer science, and I can tell you who the candidates are for the 4th one. I don't. Okay, here we go.
But
It's
at
going to
least
be
not-
mathematics, science, computer science, and agriculture on November 28th.
And then the one in January.
And then in
is-
January, it'll be secondary ELA, world language, art, and business and marketing.
Perfect.
We've already heard from social studies last year.
Well, we haven't done these in a few years.
Okay.
So
But
we actually, so for 23, 24,
Mhm.
you can look forward to special ed, alt ed, student services, bilingual and English learners, elementary ELA, music, PE health, and social studies. That's a year ahead. We have a multi-year
There you
cycle.
go. You are very good.
Well, I'm looking off. This is not from memory. I have my notes that I pulled up. Or actually our notes.
Okay, so with that being said, our curriculum, so we have something on the 28th. Do we want to look at the week of the 20 of thing, or should we?
We could meet,
No, okay, so let's wait till the week
December.
of the December 5th. That week.
would 10 a.m. at Wednesday, the 30th work?
I was gonna say, if you want something.
Or
in the
10:30?
December 12th board meeting, I would want it no later than the 7th of December.
So how would a start time similar to today on Wednesday, the 30th? Are the 3 of you available?
That works for me.
I am.
And if 10 work, we could even kick off at 10.
10:30 works better for me.
10:30 works better, okay.
Let's go at 9:30.
Is that all right with you guys?
10:30 is fine.
The 30th?
Is that okay with you, Tim? if we do
Yeah.
it at that time?
Mark, does that work for you?
I'll make it work.
Well, I mean, we could
that's-
just as easily do it on Thursday, the 1st,
That
or
would-
on Friday, the 2nd.
Thursday would work better for me.
It
or
would
Friday.
work better for me too.
Yeah, I can't do Friday.
So how about 10:30 on Thursday, the 1st?
Sounds good.
Awesome.
I'm not putting it in because I know Rebecca will.
Okay,
Thank
awesome.
you.
So now we're just needing a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.